Hello. So this is my summary of Provincials 2016. I had 8 events, 7 skaters, 8 events. I got a teeny little white erase board, so it should work a little bit easier and better. I'm going to go through basically the same thing I did with my last summary. I'm going to go through a general overview of the event, how I felt, how I thought it went. Then I'll get into the specifics I did last time of execution levels, how everybody executed, how what their norm is especially. But I'm going to do it fairly briefly so that people can watch the first 5 minutes and hopefully if they get bored, stop watching. Then I'm going to go to, I kind of decided in the last video, I've done this video a couple times, I keep losing it somehow. I decided in the last video that I would also go through not only an execution table of how well they execute their solo, which is one of the marks in competition, execution, something, I can't remember what the second half of that is. But then I'm also going to do a kind of a more emotional, how did I feel about the results of the event, which I've said in previous videos is not really important. It's certainly not important to the skaters. Their job is not to try to get results. Their job is to try to do what I tell them and execute what I tell them. And then I'm going to do maybe, I'll just ramble for a couple minutes on a few specific incidents here, go into some more detail on the previous 2 charts. So first, my general feeling on Provincials is I wasn't happy with it at all. I went into Saturday, I had 4 events Saturday, 4 events Sunday. I went into Saturday feeling not very good about Saturday because I had a lot of very iffy programs that were going to be done Saturday, all of which could have been bad. And they all ended up okay, at least okay, if not way better than okay. So I ended up leaving Saturday feeling really good, especially once I heard the results later in the day. And then Sunday I came in feeling that 3 out of the 4 solos were going to be super good, and they ended up super good results. And one I was very worried about, and it actually turned out the one I was worried about ended up being the best execution and the best results, which I'll go over in a minute. But that's so I left Sunday feeling pretty bad about the results. So I'm not particularly happy about this event. And until I did the first video, the first time, I felt pretty bad, and then I realized that I was being a little bit irrational, illogical. So I'm going to go through, as I mentioned in one of my previous videos, you learn solos on kind of a curve like this. You don't have a solo, you have a solo, gets better and better and better and better and better over time, and eventually it plateaus out to a certain level, hopefully the maximum point total of the solo, but it tends to, go up and down a little bit depending on, and the variance of how much it goes up and down depends on the skater. And some skaters even out at maybe 90% of their max point total, some even out at 100%, and I went through all that in a previous video, which I'll link somewhere. Oh no, there we go. So I'm going to go over the execution. Now this table I did for the last competition, I don't like the purple, it's staining my board. Let's do this differently. So the, actually, you know what, I'm going to change it now. So the graph I did for the last competition was, based on the variance that they have when they start plateauing, the worst solo they do in that plateau and the best solo they do in that plateau is totally different for people. I'm going to put a number on it because, it's a little confusing with CPC, which is why I didn't do it, but generally people have their worst solo, their minimum point score, which I would call a 1, minimum expectation on execution, which is a 1, and maximum, which is a 10. And I did mention before in the last video, I put a dotted line around 5, which is average. But in a video after that, the one I linked earlier, 5 is not really the average, because generally people do, most kids kind of average somewhere around 7 or 8. So they actually have good solos most of the time once they start plateauing, and it's not. Occasionally they'll be really sick or really sad or really underfed or underslept or whatever, and they'll have a bad solo, but generally they gravitate towards the top of that chain. So I'm going to go through the 10 events I did at this competition. 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'm going to do them one at a time, very briefly. So my first event was Sora. Sora had what I would call an average skate. Let's give it maybe a 6. So again, now maybe I shouldn't have drawn the dotted line. You know what? I shouldn't be drawing the dotted line because that's some people average, as I said, some people average their solo around 10, some people average around 7, some people average around 6. But in Sora's case, she actually averages kind of evenly split between top and bottom performance. So she was about a 5 maybe, and that was kind of a normal performance for her in practice. Now, the last 2 competitions, she performed really good in competition, executed really good, far better than she normally does in practice. So this was a little bit lower than I expected her execution to be, but again, not even in the bad range of normal. She's in the totally average range of normal, so that should be okay. Sandra was next. Sandra didn't have quite as great a skate as she had at Rob McCall, where she was above 10, but she was again a 10. The solo she did was equaled the best solos she'd been doing in practice for the last 3 weeks. Plus, we had rearranged a few things, and she remembered all the changes, so extremely good performance from her. Jessica, who had been having a lot of problems with her solo lately, let's put numbers beside these, 5, 10. Jessica somehow went out and landed all her jumps, which she hasn't done in 3 weeks, and she remembered all the changes, which she hadn't done before even the warm-up, and executed some in-between things that aren't normally better, like spirals, better than she'd ever done them, which really helped raise her score. She ended up getting a gold standard, which is fairly rare. That was great. And then I had Nina, who varies a bit, but kind of averages towards the top, but I would give her about a 9 or 10 or 9.5 on how she executed based on her practice solos. I would say she usually averages maybe about here, makes a couple little mistakes. She didn't have any little mistakes, so it was better than normal, but not the best solo I've ever seen her do. Even Rob McCall, she did slightly better than here. So I'd maybe put it at a 9, not a 10. So, you look at those executions, this being their normal range, they're all right at the top of their normal range, which is pretty awesome, which is why I left Friday pretty happy. Saturday, I have Rebecca's interpretive, Madison, Becky, Rachel, free. Rachel's interpretive, again, went, I'm going to say it was the best you know what? She made a couple, her spin at the end was a little slower than it usually ever is in practice. So let's give that a 9 instead. Most of it was better than usual. Probably the best solo she's done, but there was a few little mistakes. So let's put her around a 9 out of 10 as far as execution. Now that solo is still on the upswing as far as improving. It's a very new solo, so it tends to get better week by week by week. We still haven't figured out where the plateau is yet. It hasn't plateaued yet. Madison. This is the one thing that I wasn't terribly happy with as far as execution goes. Now, somebody vomited on the ice right before Madison skated, and we had a 10-minute delay with her standing on the ice, and nobody told us what was going on. There was just this huge 10-minute delay, and after that, she skated a little... and it wasn't just... She missed the last 2 elements, which is a huge point bang on her score, but... More importantly than that, even all the way through, there was a little less confidence, a little less speed, a little less execution, maybe not even noticeable to the average viewer, but everything was, I would say, 5% worse all the way through the solo, which to me is more important. That lowers their second set of scores. But then missing the last 2 jumps, the last jump and the last spin was just huge point ding on her score. Now, she ended up placing okay, about 9th out of 12, 9th out of 13, 9th out of 13. Which is decent considering you missed your 2 highest scoring elements. But anyway, then Becky skated. Becky missed her last axle, but other than that, skated pretty clean and had good landings, good speed, great spirals. A lot of things were above average, other than the last axle, which she misses, and misses a lot in practice. So that was, now she has occasionally landed both axles, which is why I'm giving her a 9, not a 10. But her execution was generally very, very good and far better. I mean, she's another one that can be a lot further down in here in practice. So among one of the best performances she's ever done. And then Rachel went out and did the best solo she's done ever for her free skate. Give her about a 12. She had And again, it wasn't just doing all the elements. She does that occasionally in practice. It was the extra speed, extra landing positions, head up, presentation, arms nice and straight all the way through. You know, great lines and form, upper body form all the way through. Just generally good all the way through. So, you know, you look at the execution of my kids, and there's really no reason why I should be disturbed. I ended up doing an average earlier. I don't know if I gave them the same marks this time, but the average I gave them was about an 8.7 in execution on a scale of 1 to 10, which is, again, very decent. Considering there was only one blip in the solo, and that was, you know, had some extenuating circumstances to it, I consider it a very successful competition as far as execution goes. So, why was I irritated? Upset, disturbed. We're going to do the same graph, but instead of doing execution, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, there's terrible spacing there. I'm going to do results. Now again, results aren't something people should be concerned about, but you know, I generally go into competitions having expectations on how people are going to place, how people are going to do. They may be fairly vague, and there may be a fairly wide range, but I'm generally not wrong. And I was wrong a couple times in this competition, or at least once I was wrong. So as far as how they skated and what the results were, you know, I'm not going to say that I was really disappointed by Sora. Oops. SL. You know, she skates like that in practice a lot. She ended up with a bronze anyway, skating a fairly average of, you know, maybe near the bottom range of her in practice. It wasn't, she didn't bring it up a notch for competition like she usually does. We might have to investigate why, but I thought the marks were lower than they should have been, which again has nothing to do with me or her. She still got a bronze. Bronze is bronze. You know, last competition she was very near a silver. More than halfway, I think, and this time she wasn't. It was all right. Sandra ended up with a silver, which I'm going to put as, like, totally average. She gets silvers most of the time in practice. She's capable of getting a bronze if she skates very badly. I very rarely had a chance to give her a gold in practice, so I didn't really expect that, but she was really close last competition, one gold element off of getting a gold standard. But I would say I was... No, you know what? I can't give her a 5 because there's such a range to her skating. I have to give her, I think, a 6 as well. Generally happy with her performance. Then you have Jessica, who I have to give a 10 to. I didn't expect that kind of skate. I didn't expect that kind of results. Gold, even if you skate really well, it's rare to get a gold. So those results were unexpected and kind of, in some sense, saved my weekend. Jessica. Nina. Nina ended up with a silver stand. I'm going to put her about a 6 too. Reasonably okay with it. You know, 5 would be neutral. 6 is kind of happy with it, kind of okay with it. She placed 5th out of 6th in her category, but she was up in a category that I really didn't feel she was fully ready for. She's kind of in a position where she's halfway between two categories, and we decided to put her up a category instead of down, which I think has more detractors than benefits. But we did it anyway. Anyway, she skated good. She had a decent standard, and her marks weren't way out of whack with how she skated, so I was okay with it. I wasn't overjoyed. I wasn't irritated. Again, I was happy with how she skated. Kind of, her results were right about where I thought she would be if she skated like that, so no particular surprises there. Next day was the interpretive. Now I'm going to put this at -2. For months, she was the highest ranked Nova Scotian at Rob McCall out of 13 skaters, and fairly obviously ahead of all the other skaters. She's beaten all the other skaters in her event. She skated a good solo. It was better than she's ever done it. I've been getting lots of compliments from judges and coaches on her solo, and she came last in her event. Now, this has happened before to me in interpretive events. There are no elements in an interpretive event. It's all subjective. So you can get some weird discrepancy between the judges on marks, and it might just work out that she comes last. Now, she thinks her point total was terrible. It wasn't. She had a 26, and the person who won gold had a 29, which is a 3-point swing, which is not that much. It's a lot in a free skate competition, but in an interpretive competition, the range of marks is a whole lot more. So it's really not that much of a swing. But I really expected her to easily win, if not be very competitive for a gold medal. So that was interesting. And it may be that I'm not wrong. This is one of the rare cases where this is why a lot of coaches won't touch interpretive solos, because there's no way to really predict how the judges are going to react to their solos. You can have a beautiful solo, beautiful theme, beautiful choreography, beautiful execution, and if it doesn't, make sense to the judge, if the judge doesn't like the aesthetics of it, they're going to mark you down and kill it in competition. And you can have big disagreements between judges on what was good and what was bad. I have lots of stories over the years of very weird things happening with interpretive solos. Anyway, so maybe I should have adjusted my expectations to think, well, it's an interpretive, there's God knows what the judges are going to do about it. But I ended up kind of thinking along the higher end of things and ended up being wrong and slightly disappointed. Then we had what? Madison. I'm going to put Madison around a 6-2. She doesn't compete a lot. We added a bunch of new jumps to the solo. We rearranged the solo right before the competition. She moved up to star 5 for the first time, CPC for the first time. A kid vomited on the ice right before she skated. There was a lot to deal with, and a lot of, you can't really change that many factors and have a solid expectation. So she skated okay. She landed an axle. It's only the third time she's ever landed an axle in any kind of event. There were a lot of good things about the skate, despite the fact that it was a bad skate, and she came 9th out of 13, which is a very decent result considering you had the bottom end of your solo. It means that had she done a clean solo, she likely would have been in the medals or very near the medals, which is fine. If you skate good and you're in the medals, that's a great result. So I didn't really have any problems with that, strangely enough. Oh, Becky. Becky's another one where do I put that? I'm going to put that at a 1. Becky skated a clean solo, did really well, had both her spins, had every element nice. Just the only mistake was her last axle she fell on, which I knew was going to be it's a 1-point loss basically there, which is going to pop her down a couple spaces. But she, again, changed her solo, added a double silent, which we've never done before, rearranged her solo a bunch, went to CPC for the first time, went to star 5 for the first time. There was a lot of factors involved. I still expected her to do super well, but I realized after she skated about halfway through her solo that I had mentioned months earlier, when we considered whether she was going to be star 4 or star 5 this year. I mentioned that star 5 has stricter requirements on what a camel spin is, and what a sit spin is, and what a spiral is, and what a fully rotated axle is. So I had a lot of stuff I was trying to get up to star 5 CPC standards. And it wasn't until after she skated, and I was like, oh, you should medal. That should easily be a medal performance. And I was like, I went through, a back check system. Is there any possibility I'm wrong? And I'm like, oh, did I remember to tell her to get her sit spins low enough so they actually count as sit spins? And in the last 3 weeks, I hadn't mentioned it. I'd been focusing on spirals and rotated axles and trying to get the double sow rotated so you can get lots of points for them. And so I ran through my head, geez, her sit spins in both spins are borderline. They're right around legal or not legal. And it's not like you lose points for having an illegal sit spin. You lose the entire spin. The whole spin is worth 0 points if you don't have a legal position, which is around 90 degrees for a sit spin. So I warned her that if she lost both spins, those are the 2 highest scoring elements in her solo, basically, she might pop her results down 5, 6, 7 placings from where they should be. And sure enough, she ended up coming 12th out of 13th, and that was highly disappointing. But I looked at her transcripts, and everything was pretty much exactly as I had said, worst case scenario of what I'd said. But I really expected better. And had I mentioned sit spins getting an inch lower in the last 3 weeks, she would have been possibly 3 points higher and had a bronze medal. I try not to beat myself too much about that. I was trying to also make sure her spirals were legal, and her camel spin was illegal, and her axles were legal, and there was a lot of stuff to do in the 3-week period of switching from star 4 to star 5. So It's unfortunate, but her first competition in Star 5 is a learning experience for everyone. So I wasn't, maybe giving her a 1 is, I'd say I was disappointed by it. Not by the skate, but it's not by an execution problem, but by a technical problem. And then last was Rachel's solo, which was, I'm going to put it at like an 11. Not only was her skate better than it should be, but even after she skated, no, you know what? It's not that good. After she skated, I still knew she'd be likely not third or fourth. Somebody else would have to have skated badly for it to be third or fourth. She ended up fifth. Ended up with 2 points higher than her high score at fall skate, which is great. She had a 17 fall skate. She had a 15 point something. So the results were good. I was really happy with them, and it kind of salvaged some of my weekend. But if you end up going over the average of those, the average of the results was somewhere around, I did it earlier, I remarked people, but I'm going to say the average was somewhere around 4.7 out of 10. Generally when my people execute well, which they did, I expect to have great results, which I didn't really have. So that's my assessment of Provincials. Now, because I'm a little disappointed with Provincials, it's probably my worst competition as a coach in 4 years. I'm probably going to tighten up my expectations for testing, which is fine because we don't have any ice the week of test day, and we have another test day in 2 months, which I can focus completely on passing tests for. So I'm likely to pull a whole bunch this test day and hold them all over to the next test day. I still have quite a few tests going in this test day, but I want to make sure that that I'm not disappointed either with the execution or the results. I think that's it. I kind of covered all the expanded things during the meeting. Sorry it was so long. Bye.